My family keeps saying my brother, the doctor, is the real success story. A leaderboard appeared in my vision last week. Hospital-wide save rate ranked. I've been number 1 for 6 months. He's 14th. I saw it for the first time over a crashing patient in Bay 4, green text floating at the edge of my vision like a heads-up display in a video game, while I had both hands on a chest doing compressions and a resident was shouting for epi. I remember thinking, very calmly, in the middle of all of it, that I was finally the one having the stroke. I wasn't, the patient lived, the text stayed. It's been 8 days now, nobody else can see it. I've tested that more than I'd like to admit, asked a resident to read a whiteboard 6 inches to the left of where the numbers float, watched him read the whiteboard and nothing else. Whatever this is, it's mine, the way almost nothing else in my life has ever been just mine. It isn't just Adam and me on the list, either. There are 200 names on it, give or take, everyone on staff who's touched a code in the last 6 months, ranked all the way down. I've spent an embarrassing number of off hours scrolling through names I recognize, watching people's actual numbers sit next to the reputations they've spent years building around this hospital. Some match. A lot don't. Here's what you need to know about my family first. I'm an ER nurse at Cumberland Regional in Nashville. 8 years, night shift more often than not. The kind of job where you learn exactly how much weight a human chest can take before something gives. My brother Adam is an ER attending, same hospital, same department, technically 2 ranks above me on paper and immeasurably higher than that at every dinner table I've ever sat at. Our parents, Robert and Elena Delgado, have a story about our family, and the story has 2 characters in it. There's Adam, who saves lives, and there's Mara, who's very sweet and very steady and works so hard, bless her. I have a notebook, composition blue cover held together with packing tape at this point. Since my first code as a brand new nurse, a 71-year-old man named Frank DeLuca, who coded twice in one night, and walked out of this hospital 3 weeks later, I've written down one name after every shift where I helped keep someone alive, not for anyone else. I never showed it to Adam. I never showed it to my parents. 8 years of names in my own shorthand, the only place on earth where what I do gets counted by anyone at all. I have sat through 3 of Adam's promotion parties. He has never once been to one of my performance reviews, and neither, notably, have our parents, who don't know what a performance review is, since nobody's ever needed them to. The dinner where all of this really started was supposed to be for both of us. My 8-year work anniversary landed the same week as Adam making attending. My mother mentioned mine for exactly 1 sentence, somewhere between the salad course and the news that Adam had been asked to speak on a hospital panel about the future of emergency medicine in Nashville. 8 years, Elena said, patting my hand. Time flies. We're so proud of you for sticking with something so steady. Then, to Adam, eyes lit up like a marquee. Tell them about the panel again. Tell them what Dr. Ashworth said. He said I was the kind of doctor this hospital builds its reputation on, Adam said, not quite able to keep the smile off his face, not quite trying to. Under the table, I did math I've been doing my whole life without meaning to. 8 years of names in a blue notebook nobody's ever asked to see, versus 1 sentence from a hospital administrator, repeated at dinner like scripture. My father topped it off without even looking up from his plate. Every family needs someone who keeps the lights on and someone who changes the world, he said. We're not embarrassed you're the first, kind sweetheart. We just don't confuse it for the second. I said something about needing to be at work early. Nobody asked me to stay. This wasn't new. The summer I got into nursing school, my parents had a tuition fund they'd been building for years, earmarked, they always said, for whichever of us needed it most. Adam needed an MCAT prep course that same summer, 6 weeks long and expensive enough that the fund covered exactly one of us. My mother explained it to me at the kitchen table, gently, like she was doing me a favor by explaining at all. Nursing school's so much more affordable anyway, sweetheart. You'll barely need it. I took out loans. I paid them off 4 years ago, the same month Adam finished his fellowship debt-free. Nobody at that dinner table has ever once said those 2 facts out loud in the same breath, and for 8 years, neither had I met Sawyer Kincaid 4 days after the leaderboard first appeared, which meant 4 days after I'd started quietly wondering whether the stress of this job had finally cracked something open in my head that wasn't going to close again. He showed up on a Tuesday, introduced as a new attending doing a rotation through our department. Getting reacquainted with frontline medicine was the phrase Dr. Ashworth used. The specific vague phrase administrators use when they don't want to explain something further. I clocked him as competent within the first hour and overqualified within the second. He ran a trauma with the calm of someone who'd done it 1,000 times somewhere with better equipment and worse odds, and he watched the room, not just the patient, the whole room, who was doing what, who was covering for whom, the way you watch something you're actually being paid to notice. The first real code we ran together was a pediatric arrest, and I called for EP a half second before he did. He looked at me across the bed afterward, chest still moving air on its own, both of us catching our breath. That saved last Tuesday, he said later in the hallway, apropos of nothing, the one with the pediatric code. How'd you know to escalate that fast? 8 years of doing it, I said. You start to feel it before the monitor confirms it. Somebody should be counting that, he said, quiet. Not a compliment exactly, closer to a fact he was frustrated nobody else had bothered to state out loud. I didn't tell him someone was. I didn't tell anyone that. 2 nights later, we ended up on the same unpaid dinner break at 3 in the morning, splitting a bag of pretzels and a vending machine sandwich neither of us fully trusted. This is genuinely the worst sandwich I have ever encountered, Sawyer said, turning it over like it might confess to something. That's the $7 one. Wait till you try the $4 one. There's a cheaper one that's worse than this? Cheaper and worse aren't related here. It's more of a lateral move. I ate a pretzel instead, watching him consider the sandwich with the seriousness of a man reviewing a differential diagnosis. You could just not eat it. I've operated on a schedule that doesn't allow for dignity in a long time, he said. This tracks. It was such a small, stupid conversation. I couldn't tell you why I still remember exactly how many pretzels were left in the bag when he finally set the sandwich down in surrender. Some nights, that's the one I go back to more than any of the ones that came after. The night nothing was on fire, and he was just a man complaining about a sandwich next to a woman who hadn't laughed that freely in longer than she wanted to admit. The favor Adam did me next, he didn't think of as a favor. 3 weeks into Sawyer's rotation, a man named Wyatt Hollis collapsed on the sideline at a high school football game across town. Beloved coach, 31 years at the same school, the kind of local name that makes the 6 o'clock news. I ran that code. I made the call to shock a second time when the first didn't hold. Adam arrived 4 minutes later, when Hollis already had a pulse back and stayed exactly long enough to be photographed at the bedside for the hospital's newsletter. Quick thinking and steady hands saved Coach Hollis's life this week, the newsletter read beneath a photo of Adam. My name did not appear anywhere in the piece, neither I noticed did the 4 minutes. I didn't say anything. I've gotten very good over 8 years at not saying anything. Sawyer found me in the break room that night, staring at the newsletter on my phone like it might rearrange itself if I looked hard enough. You ran that code, he said, not a question. Doesn't matter who ran it. Matters whose name goes in the newsletter. It should matter. He sat down across from me, close enough that I could tell he meant it. I've read your file. Actual paper, not the version your family tells at dinner. I laughed, short and surprised. What version do you think my family tells? The one where you're the sweet one, he said. I've been here 3 weeks. I don't think anyone's called you sweet who's actually watched you work. I want to tell you I said something clever back. I didn't. I just sat there in a break room that smelled like burnt coffee, feeling something loosen in my chest that had been clenched for longer than I could remember agreeing to. What I didn't know yet was that Sawyer Kincaid wasn't just reading my file out of professional interest. He'd been reading everyone's file. That was the entire point of him being there, and it had nothing to do with getting reacquainted with frontline medicine. 3 weeks before he ever set foot in our ER, in an office on the 40th floor of a downtown Nashville tower, Sawyer sat across from his father, Walton Kincaid, chairman of Highfield Health Alliance, the network that owned Cumberland Regional and 11 hospitals like it. You want me on the floor, Sawyer said, not in a boardroom looking at somebody else's spreadsheet. I want real numbers, Walton said. His hands folded on the desk, had the faint tremor that had started the year before and hadn't stopped. Every department head in this network tells me their people are excellent. I want to know which ones actually are, before I hand you a network with 14 underperforming ERs I can't afford to keep open and no way to tell which ones are worth saving. Go in as staff, nobody performs for the boss's son if they don't know he's in the room. And if I find someone worth saving who isn't a department dad, a person. Walton looked at him for a long moment. Then you'd better be sure, he said, before you tell her who you are, because the day you do, she stops being able to tell whether you noticed her, or whether you were just doing your job. Sawyer didn't have an answer for that yet, he wouldn't for weeks. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was a man who kept finding reasons to stand next to me at the nurse's station, and a leaderboard that kept insisting, in green floating text only I could see, that the version of me my family had at dinner, and the version of me that worked this floor, were not the same person at all. The gap between those two versions of me started showing up everywhere once I started looking for it. Adam asked me for a favor of his own 2 days after the Hollis newsletter ran, the kind of favor that only makes sense if you've never once considered that the person you're asking might notice its shape. I need you to help me put together my excellence packet, he said, sliding a folder across my kitchen counter, the one place we still occasionally overlapped outside the hospital. Case summaries, outcomes, the metric stuff. You're better at pulling that together than I am. You want me to build the data case for why you deserve an award nurses aren't even allowed to be nominated for. Don't make it weird, Mara. It's just numbers. He said it like numbers were a language he was fluent in and I was merely good at typing. You'd want me to help you too if it were reversed. I built the packet. I want to tell you I refused, but 8 years of practice doesn't unlearn itself in 1 week, just because you've started noticing the pattern. I pulled his outcomes data myself, cross-referenced it against my own shifts, and found, quietly, that 4 of the 6 cases in his strongest section had my initials on the actual chart notes, buried under a signature line. I didn't tell him that. I wrote it down instead, in a different notebook than the blue one, the first time in 8 years I'd needed 2 separate ledgers for the same life. Dr. Ashworth, our medical director, ran the Highfield Excellence Award nomination meeting the way he ran everything, briskly, and without once glancing at the nursing staff lined up along the back wall. The Excellence Award has always been physician track, he said, when one of the other nurses gently asked whether nominations were open to the whole floor this year. That's not a slight. That's just how the category's defined. I looked at Priya Nair, our quality and safety data analyst, sitting 3 seats down. She didn't look back at me. She just wrote something in the margin of her notes, hard enough that I heard the pen. Priya and I had lunch 2 days later in the cafeteria, at the hour when it's mostly empty except for people tired to notice they're eating. I've had a pattern sitting in my data for a year, she said, without preamble, stirring a coffee she wasn't drinking. I haven't said anything because a pattern isn't proof, and I'm not going to accuse a physician of anything without something ironclad. What pattern? Save rate attribution doesn't always match who actually ran the code, it matches who signed the chart last. She finally looked at me. You know whose name usually goes on the chart last, Mara? I thought about the newsletter. I thought about Wyatt Hollis's 4 minutes, the ones nobody wrote down. I thought about a green number floating at the edge of my vision that had said, quietly and without any interest in being believed, that I already knew this. If I told you something strange, I said, would you think I was losing it? She set down the coffee. Try me. I almost did, right there with a plastic fork halfway to my mouth. What stopped me wasn't doubt in her. It was doubt in myself, the specific fear that saying it out loud to someone whose judgment I actually respected might be the thing that cost me hers. Some other time, I said. Fine, but for the record, Priya said, I've watched you work for 3 years. If you told me you'd started seeing ghosts, I'd ask which one was slowing down triage, not whether you were making it up. I didn't tell her that night. I wasn't ready to say it out loud to anyone yet, not even someone who'd clearly already half-guessed the shape of the truth I was circling. The night I finally did say it out loud, it was 3 in the morning, and it was Sawyer, and it wasn't a choice so much as exhaustion finding the cracks in me faster than my judgment could patch them. We were in the parking garage, both of us off shift, both of us too wired to drive yet. I'd just watched Adam explain to a family, with tremendous warmth, a diagnosis I'd made 20 minutes earlier and told him about in the hallway. I keep seeing something, I said, staring at the concrete instead of at him. A leaderboard, green text, floating, like a video game. Hospital-wide save rate. I've been number 1 for 6 months. Adam's 14th. I laughed, the specific broken laugh of a person handing someone else the worst thing they know about themselves. So either I'm losing my mind, or the actual math of my life and the story my family tells about it have never once been the same document. I expected him to go quiet, the careful way people go quiet around someone they've just realized might not be well. Instead he asked, "What's the exact number for your rate?" 94% save rate over 6 months, Adam's at 71. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Something crossed his face I didn't have a name for yet, not disbelief, recognition. "I need 48 hours, he said finally. "Don't tell anyone else what you just told me." I didn't ask why. I was too tired and too afraid of what asking might cost me to do anything but nod. He came back in 41 hours, not 48, and he didn't look like a man delivering good news. He looked like a man who'd just watched something impossible come itself twice. 94%, he said. Over the last 2 quarters, hospital-wide adjusted for acuity. That's the real number, Mara. That's what's actually in the system, the real one, the audited one, not the one on a floating screen only you can see. He exhaled like he'd been holding it since the parking garage. You didn't imagine a number. You imagined a scoreboard. But the number underneath it is data I have access to and you shouldn't. How do you have access to hospital-wide audited data? That was the question. I watched him decide in real time to finally answer it honestly. Because I'm not just an attending doing a rotation, he said. My father is Walton Kincaid. He owns this hospital and 11 others. I'm his son, and in 6 weeks I'm supposed to be running all of it, and right now I'm supposed to be quietly finding out which of his hospitals, and which of his people, are actually as good as they claim to be at dinner parties. A pause. You were never supposed to be the answer to that question. You were supposed to be a data point. And now? Now I don't know how to write you into a spreadsheet without lying about the rest of it, he said. I didn't say anything for a long time. I want to tell you I was angry. Mostly, underneath everything, I felt something closer to vertigo, the specific dizziness of learning that the one place I'd been quietly, privately right about myself had been checked twice by someone with the actual power to prove it, and it had held up both times. 3 weeks, I said finally, meaning the Excellence Gala, the same date Sawyer's identity was apparently scheduled to stop being a secret, meaning nothing, meaning everything. 3 weeks, he agreed. After that, I can't be careful about this anymore. I don't want to be either. The breaking point when it came had nothing to do with Sawyer or the leaderboard at all. It came in a morbidity and mortality conference, the kind of case review meeting where the department picks apart what went wrong so it doesn't happen twice. A patient of Adam's had crashed from a medication dose that should have been titrated slower. Adam had given the verbal order. The order had been executed exactly as given. I gave clear verbal orders, Adam said, to a room of a dozen physicians and exactly 2 nurses. If execution didn't match the order as given, that's a nursing issue, not a physician one. I was the nurse who'd executed that order. Exactly as given. I had the timestamp to prove it, the same timestamp Adam was currently describing as somebody else's failure. I didn't say anything in the room. 8 years of practice held. I said something instead, quietly to Priya, in the hallway afterward, and I watched her write it down hard enough to hear the pen again. That night, at my parents' house delivering a birthday gift for my mother a week early because my shift schedule wouldn't allow the actual day, I made the mistake of mentioning, once lightly, that the M&M conference that week had been rough. Adam mentioned that, my mother said. He said a dosing order got misread. He was very gracious about it, actually considering. It wasn't misread, I said. It was executed exactly as ordered. My mother's face did something small and tired, the expression of a woman being asked to hold 2 facts she'd already decided couldn't both be true. Mara, he's under enormous pressure right now, with the Excellence nomination. I'd think you, of all people, would want to support that, instead of relitigating a meeting nobody asked you to relitigate. You've always been so good at being the supportive one, my father added, not looking up from the television. It's practically a talent. I'd hate for that to change now of all times. I drove home night without turning on the radio. Somewhere around the interstate exit for the hospital, I stopped absorbing it. I couldn't have told you the exact second. I just noticed, pulling into the parking garage, that I wasn't replaying what they'd said anymore. I was already thinking about what I was going to do about it. I sat in the car for a while before I went up. I thought about Frank DeLuca, the first name in the blue notebook, and how certain I'd been at 23 that competence was the kind of thing that simply got noticed eventually, the way a wound gets noticed, the way a fever gets noticed. 8 years later I understood that wasn't true and had never been true. Some things only get noticed if somebody with a reason to look decides to. I wasn't going to spend a ninth year waiting to be that reason for someone else. I didn't confront anyone, that's the part I'm proudest of. Priya and I built the case the quiet way. Over the next 2 weeks, chart timestamps, the M&M record, 6 months of save rate data pulled the legitimate way this time, through her actual clearance instead of a stranger's vision. Sawyer added the network-wide audit numbers, the ones with his signature on them instead of a floating green number only I could see. He showed up at my apartment one night with a printed copy of the full audit, 40-some pages, and set it on my kitchen table like it was something fragile. "You don't have to use all of it," he said. "But I wasn't going to let you walk in there with less proof than I already have sitting in a drawer." "Is this what falling for someone looks like in your family? Printer paper and a chain of custody?" "In my family," he said, "it's the first time anyone's handed someone proof instead of a verdict." "If we do this," I told Priya, 3 nights before the gala, "I want it to be something my family can't call an overreaction. Documents, timestamps. Somebody else's name next to mine on the page." I hesitated, then slid the blue notebook across the table to her, the way you hand someone something you've never once led your own apartment. "And this, in case the numbers ever need a face. Then we bring it to the one room your family can't talk over," she said. "The gala has the whole board there. Dr. Ashworth, the Kincaids, half of Nashville's hospital administration in one ballroom." I didn't sleep well in the nights before it. I kept thinking about a man in a parking garage saying somebody should be counting, and a green number that had never once needed anyone else's permission to be true, and wondering how much of the last month I'd spent afraid of a fact that had been solid the entire time. The Highfield Excellence Gala was held in the atrium of Highfield Tower, 40 floors of glass holding 200 people in cocktail attire, string quartet working through something classical near the windows, the whole skyline of Nashville lit up behind them like a backdrop nobody in the room was pausing to actually look at. Walton Kincaid was scheduled to speak at 8:30, the consolidation results for the network's 14 underperforming ER departments, and the Excellence Award, back-to-back, the same announcement everyone assumed would double as Adam Delgado's introduction to Nashville's hospital elite as Cumberland Regional's rising star. I wore my own dress that night, not a look I'd chosen for war, and it still felt like armor. Small thing, felt enormous. Adam found me near the entrance, straightening his tie in the reflection of the elevator doors, radiating the specific confidence of a man who's never once had to wonder if a room was going to go his way. "Big night," he said, not quite looking at me. "Try to be happy for me tonight, Mara, just tonight." "I've been happy for you plenty of nights," I said. "I'm just done being invisible on the same ones." He laughed like I'd made a joke. I let him think that for another 20 minutes. I found Priya by the bar at 8, folder in her bag. "Ready?" she asked. I said yes, I was wrong but only about the timing. Because at 8:15, before either of us could get near the stage, my mother found me first, near the coat check, her voice pitched low and urgent in the specific register she uses when she's about to ask me to disappear for someone else's comfort. "Whatever you and that data woman are planning tonight," she said, "please don't. Adam told us you've been saying strange things. About numbers. About some kind of scoreboard only you can see." Her eyes were kind and devastating at the same time. "Sweetheart, if the stress of this job has gotten to be too much, that's nothing to be ashamed of. But tonight is not the night to have some kind of episode in front of the entire Kincaid family." There it was, my own private fear. The one I'd handed to exactly one person in a parking garage, weaponized and handed back to me in a hallway by my own mother, 3 feet from a bar full of people who mattered to her more than I apparently did. "I'm not having an episode." "Then prove it by sitting down," my father said, appearing at her shoulder, "and letting your brother have one night that isn't about you." "It was never about me," I said. "That's the entire problem you two have never once been able to see." "Mara," my mother's voice cracked into something almost pleading. "Please. Not here. Not in front of these people." "These people are about to hear the actual math," I said. "For once, it isn't going to be me deciding whether that's convenient." I didn't get the chance to say anything else. Dr. Ashworth's assistant was already at my elbow, gently, firmly, the specific grip of someone told to manage a problem rather than solve one, angling me toward a quieter corner of the atrium, like a piece of furniture being moved out of a photograph. They walked me almost to the elevator bank. I stopped there. I don't fully know why. 8 years of not making a scene, maybe finally losing an argument to something older and less patient. Which is the only reason I was still close enough to hear what happened next. Dad, Sawyer's voice from near the stage, pitched to Carrie without shouting, the kind of voice a room stops for whether it means to or not. Before you read the consolidation numbers, there's a name in that report I want everyone to hear correctly. The room did the thing rooms do when the wrong person speaks first, a ripple, string quartet trailing off mid-phrase. Walton Kincaid, silver-haired, steady despite the tremor in his hands, looked at his son for a long moment, then nodded once, the specific nod of a man who already knows what's coming and has decided to let it happen anyway. "This is my son, Sawyer Kincaid," Walton said to the room, vice chairman, effective tonight. He spent the last 6 weeks working the floor at Cumberland Regional as staff, at my request, because I wanted real numbers before I decided which of our 14 underperforming departments deserved to survive this consolidation. "Go ahead, Sawyer." Sawyer walked to the microphone, not fast, not dramatic, the pace of a man who's been waiting exactly as long as he said he would. Priya moved with him, folder open. "Cumberland Regional's emergency department has the highest acuity-adjusted save rate in the entire Highfield network," Sawyer said. 94% over the last 2 quarters. That single number is the reason that department isn't on tonight's consolidation list. It survives, and it survives because of the work of one nurse in that department, more than any other single person on staff. He looked toward the corner where I was standing, security's hand still loose on my elbow, and something in the room followed his eyes before he even said my name. "Mara Delgado," he said. 8 years on that floor, number 1 hospital-wide, for 6 consecutive months, on the metric that actually decides whether an emergency department gets to keep its doors open. I have the audit. Priya Nair, our quality and safety lead, has the charts. And Mara has something neither of us do." I didn't understand what he meant until I felt Priya press something small and blue into my hand, my own notebook, the one I'd handed her 3 nights earlier, half convinced it would never leave her bag again, let alone end up in front of 200 people. 8 years of names, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, holding up a composition notebook held together with packing tape in a room full of people holding champagne. Every patient I helped keep alive, written down the night it happened, starting with a man named Frank DeLuca, who coded twice and walked out of this hospital 3 weeks later. Nobody asked me to keep this. I kept it because somebody should be counting, even if it only ever going to be me. Somewhere in the crowd, a woman I didn't know pressed a hand to her mouth. Dr. Ashworth found his voice first, reaching for the folder like he could still redirect the room by sheer force of tone. "The Excellence Award has always been a physician-track distinction. Surely we're not rewriting eligibility mid-ceremony because of a nurse's personal diary." "How long has that eligibility rule existed, Preston?" Walton asked, still mild, still perfectly pleasant, which was somehow worse than if he'd shouted. "Since the award's founding, 11 years. And in 11 years, has a single nurse in this network ever once been permitted to submit a packet for review?" Ashworth didn't answer that. He didn't need to. The silence answered for him, and I watched 2 decades of quiet institutional certainty do something I'd never seen it do before in front of a crowd, falter. "We are actually rewriting it," Walton said to the room now. "Effective tonight, the Highfield Excellence Award is open to all clinical staff, physician or otherwise. I should have written it that way from the start. My son just made it very clear why." Adam hadn't moved. When he finally spoke, his voice had none of the warmth it carried at family dinners. "This is absurd. Every attending signs off on outcomes their team executes. That's how medicine works." "It is," Sawyer said. "Which is why the Hollis case has your name on the chart, and Mara's 4 minutes of downtime before you arrived aren't in the newsletter anywhere. And why the dozing incident from this month's M&M conference has a verbal order timestamped to you, and an execution timestamped exactly to that order, by a nurse you told a room of your colleagues was responsible for your mistake." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "That file's already been forwarded to credentialing. That part isn't up for a vote tonight." My father tried once more, quieter now, the fight going out of it even as he said it. "She's still our daughter. We never said she wasn't." "You never had to say it," I said, and for the first time in my life, I said it to their faces instead of into a steering wheel on the drive home. "You just never once said the other thing. That I was good at this. that the 8 years counted for something you'd actually repeat at a dinner table. My mother didn't answer that. I don't think she had one ready. I watched her look, for the first time I can remember, at the actual math of her own 2 children, instead of the story she'd been telling about them for 30 years. Walton Kincaid closed the consolidation report without reading another line from it. I think, he said, we've heard the number that mattered tonight already. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday that wasn't a special occasion at all, my mother called and asked, for the first time in 8 years, what my week at work had actually looked like. I told her about a woman named Deborah Choi, a cardiac arrest in Bay 2, 72 seconds of compressions before a rhythm came back. She listened to the whole thing. She asked a follow-up question. I wrote Deborah Choi's name in the blue notebook that night the way I always have, except for the first time, it wasn't the only place her name got said out loud with any weight behind it. My father didn't call. He came by instead, unannounced, on a Sunday, and stood in my doorway a long moment before he said anything at all. I don't know how to have this conversation, he admitted, which was, from him, close to an apology. I'm not sure I know how to stop having the other one either. The one or Adam's the whole headline. He shifted his weight, looking somewhere past my shoulder. I'd like to try, though. If you'll let me be bad at it for a while. I let him in. I didn't tell him it fixed anything, because it didn't, not all at once. But it was the first time in 31 years he'd shown up somewhere for me without an occasion attached to it, and I decided that was worth more than a perfect sentence would have been. Adam's credentialing review is still open. I don't know how it ends, and for the first time in my life, that's genuinely not my job to manage. Sawyer picked me up after my shift the following Friday, off the clock, no audit between us anymore. He had the composition notebook in his lap. I'd left it with him after the gala, half by accident, half because some part of me wanted him to actually read all 8 years instead of just the last 6 months. Frank DeLuca, he said, thumb resting on the first page, your first one. He sent a fruit basket 3 weeks later. I still have the card. Somebody was always counting, Sawyer said. It just took the rest of the world a while to catch up to your own math. I didn't need a leaderboard to know that anymore. Some nights it still shows up anyway, quiet now, almost fond, like a habit that's outlived its job. I let it. It was there before anyone else was willing to be. I was never actually behind. I was just the last one in the room to see the real number. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story.